We are talking with Jennifer Dupee. She's a debut novelist, and she's the author of The Little French Bridal Shop. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Doris. So nice to be
Right.
here.
Good. First, tell us, what is the book about?
So the story is set in motion when Larissa Pearl returns to her small seaside hometown upon the death of her great aunt Ursula. She's in a bit of a funk. She's just lost her job and she's just recently broken up with her boyfriend, and she's struggling with her mother's failing health. And on a whim, she wanders into the local bridal shop and buys a dress, even though she has no groom. Small town chaos ensues, and the story progresses from there.
What prompted you to set the story in an old house, and tell us a little bit about that house?
Yeah, so I've always had a fascination with old houses. I just love, there's something about sort of the bones of old houses, the details, the fact that they've been here for hundreds of years. And when my husband and I first started dating, I discovered that he had a love for old houses as well. And we would often take walks through a neighborhood nearby down Elmhurst Road. And I was embarking on the opening pages of my novel at the time, and I named the house in the book Elmhurst. And the house in the book, in tribute to the house that we had admired. The house in the book is really like a character in the book. Larissa and her father really have inherited it, and the opening pages of the book, she's about to sell it. But then we also meet the caretaker, the longtime caretaker of the house, who's a local guy by the name of Jack, and he's going through some tough time with his wife, and he and Larissa meet up, and they begin to renovate the house together.
What in the world made Larissa buy a wedding dress when she wasn't planning on getting married?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So as I mentioned, she's not quite herself, and she's in a bit of a state. So in the beginning of the novel, she takes a crowbar, for instance, to the wallpaper in the dining room because of a suspected leak. But it's also just because she's got kind of all this pent up emotion and anger, and it's because she's really struggling with her mother's worsening health. Her mother's struggling with dementia. And this was a state that I kind of recognized because I felt it myself when I was grappling with my own mother's health when she was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 24 and she was 51. And as I began to write the book, I realized that I really wanted to explore the feelings of loss of identity and confusion that overwhelms a caretaker, even a child or an adult child of someone who's ailing.
What is this is your very first novel?
It is.
How long was it in the making?
It's my first novel to be published, but it's I would say it's my third novel that I've written, 3 or 4 depending kind of on how you count. So it's been a long time coming in that sense. But I started this book I really dug into it around 2015 and finished it in 2019. And I work full time, so it wasn't, a linear journey per se. So it took about 5 years. But I tend to let a novel gestate for some time before I actually dig into the writing of it.
How many revisions did you have to go through?
There was something about this book that really meshed for me from the beginning. So I had kind of the crux of the idea of her, wandering into the shop and buying the dress. And I had a sense of the ending. And then as I kind of got to each chapter, I really just organically came to things. So with this book, I didn't have a ton of revision, but then of course, writing really is revision. And I love the revision process actually. So I'd say I did really one major revision, but probably, 4 or 5, smaller tweaks and smaller revisions. Oh, I'm going to move my camera here because we got some... Right. Sorry about that.
That's divine intervention, I think.
Isn't it?
How have you, I understand that you've always wanted to write. Tell us about your publishing journey. How did you get your first agent? How
Yeah,
did,
so I was actually working on a different project. I had been pitching my agent with a different project, one that I'd worked on for really quite a number of years, 10 plus years. And he was intrigued and he asked for an exclusive for a week. And, I kind of had fingers crossed, okay, maybe he'll go with it. And he ultimately passed on that project, but he said, let's have a call. And I want to hear what else you might have in the works. And I had just embarked on this novel. And so I developed it and sent it to him bit by bit. And we worked on it together. And we had sort of 2 rounds of submission, which is really pretty good, So from
yeah.
that side, it's been great, but it was a long time building up to that, many years.
And tell us about that day that he
Mm.
called you and told you that St. Martin's Press had really bought the,
Yeah, well, first off, so St. Martin's is just a terrific house. So I'm so lucky to just be outfitted with just a great group of people behind me. And, it's a strange thing, right? Because I work full time. And so I'm at work, getting this phone call and kind of being excited and sort of trying to not get teary and too loud and it's exciting. But just pure excitement and disbelief that it finally comes through. You wait forever and ever and ever, and then when it finally happens, you think, "Oh my
yeah,
gosh, wow!"
yeah.
Yeah,
Now you've been an active member of the Grub Street writing community in Boston. What is the value of that community?
the value of that community is huge. So I've been a member of the Grub Street writing community for I think since 2003, and they've just been immensely supportive to my writing career and my writing life. They run both sort of smaller workshops, like weekend workshops on craft. So they might do a 2-day workshop or a 1-day workshop, but then they also have weeks-long classes. So you could do 6 weeks of 6 stories in 6 weeks, or essay writing, and then they do longer classes for novel writing as well. And in addition, I met my writing group there. So I have 3 wonderful women with whom I work on writing. We meet every 2 weeks and we critique, and we meet via Zoom now. We used to meet in person, but Zoom has worked out okay. And they've just been so wonderful and so valuable to my writing process, and both from the standpoint of their advice, but also just their support.
What was the most difficult thing for you in the writing process? Is it dialogue? Is it structure?
Yeah, so I'm really, really drawn to descriptive writing. So I love to write, I grew up near the ocean, so I'm writing about the ocean, and I'm writing about the Northeast, which is, in houses. So I really revel in writing about setting. Dialogue is tricky. I think having, they always say dialogue needs to do more than one thing, right? So it's not just an interchange of words between 2 people, but it's also moving the plot forward, or it's giving information to the reader. So dialogue is tricky. I also am drawn towards flashback, and I think that you really don't want to put too much flashback in a book, because you want the momentum of the story to pull forward. Yeah.
You are a semifinalist. You were a semifinalist for the 2016 James Jones First Novel Competition, and a semifinalist for the 2016 Faulkner Wisdom Competition.
Mm-hmm.
How have winning these awards helped your chances of being published, do you think?
Oh, I think they have helped. It's nice to be able to put a little something in your bio to show that you have some credibility, that at least other people have been paying attention. At a minimum, I think it gets an agent or an editor to pay a little attention, to say, hey, somebody liked her work, so there must be some merit there, right?
Is your job at all related to writing, or?
Not at all related, which is a good thing, actually.
Yeah.
So I work for a biotech company in an operations capacity, so operations and administration. And I love, honestly, that it's largely not creative, because I like being able to have kind of my analytical and operational brain at work, and then my creative brain kind of functioning at home. So I've had other jobs that were more creative, and I find that I came home kind of at the end of the day a little depleted.
Well, now you graduated with honors in creative writing from Brown University.
Yeah.
And how helpful has that been to your publishing career?
Well, yeah, it's been a while since I was there, I'll say. But I loved being at Brown. I loved the atmosphere, and I loved the English classes I took. And I was surrounded in my workshops by some really inventive and unique writers. So I think, that's given me a larger perspective on writing and kind of what's possible. At Brown, there's a lot of experimental writing, so I don't tend to do experimental writing, but to have the exposure to it is fantastic.
Right. When you reread your work, do you cringe, or is there anything you want to change?
Oh, I mean, every now and then. I did a reading recently, and I quite liked it. I can, because it's been a while, I can distance myself from, the writer critiquer and become a little bit more of an actor in the performance of my own work. But sure, there are moments where I think, oh, I could have taken that word out, or I could have maybe, it wasn't quite right. But I'm pretty perfectionist at the start, so I try to
Did
get
you
it
ever
right.
think that maybe it would not happen, or were you ever
Oh yeah.
discouraged?
Oh yeah. I mean, so despite the fact that at times it's hard, and I did think, oh, is this ever going to happen for me? I never would have stopped writing. It's a kind of a challenge and a pleasure to which I always return, and I fully expect to return to it,
Wow, that's good.
forever. Yeah.
What what are you working on next?
So I'm working on, it's funny, I'm working on the novel. You had asked how I found my agent, and I'm reworking the book that I first pitched him with, the one that he passed on. And it's a novel that's set in motion when it's told from a first person perspective of a 7-year-old girl. So it's a challenging point of view. And her stepmother and her father are expecting a baby. And the story is set in motion when a strange man appears at the end of the driveway and claims that that baby could be his. So,
Ooh, wow.
uh-oh, yeah,
That'll leave us something to think about.
for sure.
What advice do you have for writers who are trying to break into the publishing world?
I think you can't go around it. You have to go through it. So, and you have to be persistent. It could take years. And during those years, you will be putting in your time developing your craft. And, I do think really practicing your craft, developing your craft, learning about it as much as possible is the way forward.
That's very, very good advice.
Mhm.
Jennifer Dupee, thank you very much for being with us today.
Doris, thank you. It's been such a pleasure.
That's Jennifer Dupee, author of The Little French Bridal Shop.